Hi everybody, here's Krystian from Teamworkcast. I'm here with Nick and today we do something new. We decided to sit down and discuss a serious topic for a change. Serious topics require a bit more time and mental energy, so we thought we'd make this an extra thing and we call it TavernTalk. Today we discuss Anita Sarkeesian and feminism, something we already mentioned briefly in a podcast a couple of times. Whenever we do, we get passionate listeners in our comments, so we thought we'd give this topic the kind of space it requires. Sadly, we had some technical issues and lost the first 5 minutes or so. We started out talking about Nick's background on this subject. He studied sociology, which is the scientific study of human society and its origins, development, organization, and institution. And of course, the focuses of sociology include especially class, culture, race, ethnicity, religion, and of course, gender. Nick got into the subject of gender and video games through this book From Barbie to Mortal Kombat sometime throughout his studies, and he has been researching the subject ever since. Afterwards, we discussed a little bit how many people seem to misunderstand the term feminism, and that's pretty much where the recording starts off. So let's go ahead and enjoy. Like the question whether men or women should be equal, that's often non-brainer for a lot of people. It's just the term feminist that people are having problems with, and that's something I personally also had a lot of problems with, actually. So the way I think is like many dudes think about feminism and think about this this is like a girls thing. I don't have to deal with this. That's one of the things I don't have to learn during university. And that's kind of how I approach this when I studied design. My background is design, and I thought okay, phew, thank God I don't have to deal with this. And so I started design and then I realized, oh my gosh, I went to do this studying, and then I realized, oh my gosh, there's entire subject in my school. There was 13 subjects, and one of them was gender and design. And I was oh my gosh. And then there was this very female doctor that was professor that was doing this, and she was regarded as this very aggressive person. I guess the strawman feminist or something, the person who will eviscerate you if you say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So I was super stressed out the first time I went to a project with her. And I was in Germany it's always the equality is often important, equality between men and women. Yes. So I was don't say anything that would make a thing that you think men and women are not equal. Men and women are equal. That was going through my mind when the project started. And she walks in, and the first time she says well, men and women are obviously not equal, so what are we going to do about this? And I was what? What? My concept! I have this was the Jon Snow moment for me, where I was oh my gosh, I'm so unprepared for this. So that was hilarious. But actually the project ended up being really cool, and to be honest, I really liked her. She was a very cool person. And she I was very surprised, at the end of the project she kind of gave me a compliment, she really liked my work, and was wow, thank you. I'm just glad that I didn't embarrass myself. And but even then, I just realized that I was completely wrong. You kind of, especially if somebody creates games or creates products in general, you kind of have to have a basic understanding of how gender works.
Yeah.
That's because your products end up being used by people of different genders.
Yeah.
Or your products end up conveying ideas about genders, implicit ideas about genders.
And it's funny, so the topic that I'm going into is information science, and the person I think I'm going to work with is obsessed with this idea of the paradox of the active user. Mm-hmm. And so he's the founder of human-computer interaction as an essential part of the computer science discipline. And he's also kind of a grandfather, one of the founders of the whole UX design, so user interfaces and stuff like that. And he says, how can you plan a product around a person that you don't know? But you need them to be able to use your product, and they don't want to have to learn how to use your product.
Yeah, the product needs to be already know, or they wait for the user.
And it's this I think he calls it the essential paradox, because the person you're going to design for is essentially a version of you who is dumb in some way. People kind of design around the person who doesn't know anything.
Yeah, it's kind of a little unavoidable, but there's that's why you kind of, as a designer, you probably have to kind of make sure that you know a lot of things, just at least superficially, so that you don't step like into common misconceptions. So the cool thing is that you have like a very theoretical approach on this subject, and I have so you know the theory. Because I didn't read too many books about this subject, to be honest, but I have this practical approach which is like both a blessing and a curse. Like the blessing is that once you get like in a very complicated discussion, you kind of have like an escape hatch where you say like, gosh, guys, I need to just figure out the color of this menu. Like, I don't have to understand everything, I'm going to make it just black, whatever.
See, for me, for my master's, I actually did, so my minor, I guess my focus was on gender studies. Because we really didn't have a lot of choices. I couldn't really think much outside of it. So anyway, I took this class called Images of Women. And for this class, the faculty member asked me basically to put together a video that you could call Tropes versus Women 1.
Oh, interesting.
So I had this long discussion of, games and their origin, the introduction of women as characters in games, and then how those women kind of went on from there.
Yeah.
It's a fun topic, but it's a very, I guess, what do you want to call it? A vitriolic topic. People don't like
the message conveyed here.
Because a lot of people are under and really it's mistaken that feminism want to eradicate men.
Yeah, they want to take away our guns.
They're going to take away our manhood. And it's like, because when we were talking about the Sarkeesian stuff when it first came around, I said, there's this guy, Philip Zimbardo, who did all this research on power, the concept of power and authority. And he did this experiment where he hired a bunch of college boys to basically recreate a prison. There were people who were prisoners, and then there were people who were cops. And it was supposed to be, I think, like a 30-day study.
Yeah, I know. And there was a great German movie about this.
Yeah. And so within 7 days, he had to stop the project because the people who were cops had basically started creating this really terrible power structure because the prisoners weren't allowed to do anything. They would make them or they would make them poop in buckets. Yeah, and then they wouldn't take the buckets out. It turned awful.
It turned to Guantanamo Bay very quickly.
Yes.
Das Experiment.
And so he now is researching this concept called the demise of guys. And what?
Oh, it's the same guy?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's really cool.
And so what he says is that men have been the target of popular culture, of consumable culture, for so long that they have no need to go out and accomplish anything on their own. Because no matter what happens, there's some product out there that will allow them to feel as though they matter. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the statistics of success in terms of gender, for every woman who succeeds at something, there are 5 guys who have failed. And so the failure, like, men are just failing across the board. And it's actually, for every woman who graduates college, there's 5 men who've failed.
Yeah, that's kind of like a statistic. He made a TED Talk video about this, right?
Yeah, it's the introduction of this work. But it's really interesting because, I mean, this guy spent his life researching the whole concept of power. And so he approached this topic through the concept of power. And it's kind of interesting.
Have you read any of his stuff?
I have the book. I haven't read it yet.
Oh man, that would be very, very cool to discuss it maybe like in a future episode. But let us maybe move on to Anita Sarkeesian. Yes. So this is like a video that was released, or like a video series that is being released. We have like 2 videos out already, and there's going to be lots and lots of more. Apparently, like at least 12 or so.
Yeah.
or 20. I don't know. It's kind of weird because she started with a much lower number and then she increased it because it used to be also like a Kickstarter project. And she asked for $6,000 and she got $160,000. So it was like incredibly successful. But also at the same time, she received like a tremendous amount of criticisms for it. Like she had like an introductory YouTube video and it was just probably, to me, it was one of the most aggressive flame wars
that I've ever seen on the internet.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like she, hilarious. Like it's really sad, actually. Like she documented some of the stuff, and it's crazy. Like people insulted her in a way that is just the most aggressive and vile way. You know, stuff like like Jewish stuff, like even like racist stuff. Like, she's a Jew, and burn her, and I'm gonna rape you, and whatever.
Yeah.
It's really like it goes beyond merely criticism and beyond even like regular internet flame wars. It's just like an atomic bomb of flaming. And now that the videos are coming out, and even before the videos came out, people started doing all this retributable videos. So one interesting thing I did while before the videos came out, like while this flame war was going on, I actually went into the comments and tried to discuss the topic with people and tried to like, what are you doing, man? Like, this is just a video. And so I feel like there are like common arguments against her that are repeated over and over again.
Yes.
Which also have been repeated in our podcasts when we talked about this topic. So we wanted to talk about these common responses to her and shed some light on those arguments.
It's amazing how similar it is to the political rhetoric of like a presidential election. Because you hear tons and tons of canned text that represent a specific ideology, that being one of the presidential candidates, and it's just repeated over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Yeah,
it's like a mantra often.
Yeah.
But to be fair, like she, like feminists also use like quite like fair number of like terms which can feel like a little bit, like patriarchy, and it's like, wow, you kind of have to explain what it means, and if you're not familiar with the term, it kind of sounds like this hermetic term.
And I think that probably the biggest caveat to make here is that in any argument of an either or, so either she's wrong or she's right, it's usually a little bit of both. Yeah. So it's not unfair to criticize, but it is unfair to dismiss.
Yeah, to say like everything she says is wrong. She's wrong as a person. She cannot be right.
Yes,
which is also some apparently arguments that people did. So let us start here. Like Nick, I'm gonna throw a common argument at you, like a very simple one. You already know what I'm gonna say, Nick. You're white knighting her. You just want to get into bed with her.
Everybody's favorite game designer, Phil Fish, recently posted a whole bunch of white knighting tweets about Anita Sarkeesian, and he kept saying, "All I want to do is get laid." And this is like the most awful, like dismissive thing, because as a man, you can't discuss a topic that involves females because there is no possible scenario where a woman and a man could be engaged in a topic without one of them wanting to have sex with the other. And it's like, okay, there's a difference between white knighting, like, I'm going to come in and save her, all of you guys are wrong, and I'm going to punch all of you. Like, okay, probably that's a little bit of white knighting. Like, you want this girl's attention because you admire the things that she stands for, and maybe there is some, like, attraction there, but for the love of God, it's not a valid, and I don't want to say a valid, but I'm going to anyway. Yeah. It's not a valid criticism if a man comes in and defends what she has to say.
Yeah.
Like, men are allowed to talk about feminist topics as well. Feminism has kind of expanded outside of the bra-burning radicalism that we all experience into this whole topic, which should be called gender studies.
Yeah. Like the term is like really a problem, and there's like lots of discussion about maybe changing the name feminism because it kind of implies women.
Yeah.
But the problems are that this topic already has so much, so much cachet attached to it. Like I guess so much knowledge and so much research attached to it. And that changing it would kind of like you would have to throw away all the stuff that already exists, and that's kind of like unfortunate.
There's a really great paper. It's by this woman who used to be a man named Connell. She's from Australia. Spent most of her life as a man. Now she's a woman. And she coined the term hegemonic masculinity.
Oh, wow.
And
that's heavy term.
It's the whole idea of hegemonic masculinity is that within masculine structures, there is a hierarchy. There's this ideal man who you could probably call
alpha male.
The alpha male, the silent protagonist in all of these video games. These are the things that we aspire to be unconsciously. Because these are our heroes, they're the astronauts, they're the football players, they are the jocks in high school, they're these rich dudes and they don't essentially exactly exist. Like the rich dude who's super athletic, who has everything, who's a super nice guy, who would always do the right thing. It just doesn't exist. That's Superman, who's not even from this planet.
Yeah.
And men are kind of pushed into this, but then you get into the hierarchy. So, like, the gamer, the nerd, like, they're at the bottom of all of this stuff.
Yeah, they're bottom feeders, so to speak. They're not like, typically, at least. Like, in when you see the world through this lens, they're not the ones.
But, anyway, he and she now has sort of pointed out at a certain point at the beginning of the 2000s, I think, that feminist and gender studies were too centered on women, and that we need to include men, because, a lot of people say, well, a woman couldn't beat up a man.
Yeah.
But most of the men making this argument could have the shit kicked out of them by any number of women. There's no, like, it's not a universal truth. You can't universally say women are weaker than men. There are competitions where women who are bodybuilders or who are boxers will carry men around as like their baggage.
Yeah, Michelle Rodriguez.
Yeah.
It could kick a lot of...
So it's sort of like the whole white knight thing when you get into, like... It's just...
That's I feel like that's one of the least rational arguments. Like there's just, if you even take it on face value, like there's no way we will ever meet Anita Sarkeesian.
It's true.
You are a married man. I am a man in a relationship since a couple of years. There is just like no conceivable way like this is going to be happening. But it's kind of interesting because also I feel like it comes like from a space where people are very concerned about getting together with women. So I feel like this is also like an argument often. I feel like for me, I always imagine like a 14-year-old making like this argument who is kind of like struggling with this himself. Like, he was going to high school and trying to be popular, and to him that seems maybe like a reasonable argument to make. I don't know. Also, like white knight is also like kind of like a grippy term, like a term that you can just throw in and just not care about explaining further. It's just white knight finished.
Yeah.
Discussion finished.
It's a drop mic moment right there.
Yeah. All right, so let us move on to a different topic. Do you want to ask me?
Yeah, I'll ask you. Okay, so the next thing that you see a lot. And there are so many. I've watched so many of these videos.
It's crazy.
Say $160,000 is way too much money, and what we're getting is not worth it. She is scamming us.
Yeah, that's a common argument. It was something that was present from the first day on, and you can see it as being told even today. Like, especially like the idea of scamming people is also like a very prevalent notion. And I can understand that because it's like a lot of money being involved, and you go like, whoa. And also, like, the thing that she does, like most people get for free. Like, she's making a YouTube video, and there are lots of YouTube videos you can get for free. So it may seem like an obvious thing to make. But I feel like once you start analyzing it, it's just get like a little bit ridiculous. So I actually, because we are recording videos, I actually did some research on this, and I also like studied a little bit, video editing and stuff like that. So I did some research on this, and so like the original pitch was $6,000 for 5 videos, which is $80 per video minute, right?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Right now we are talking about $160,000, and she said she vamped up to 12 videos, and but like 12 tropes. But the first trope was already 3 videos, so we're talking about a huge number of videos. And so you get only it's still more, but it's just $220 per minute, which is a huge upgrade compared to the $80, but it's still like if you compare this to like a professional production, if you were like a company and you wanted to buy a web video from a company that produces videos, the rates you actually go at is somewhere between $600 and $1,600 per minute, and that's something I got. I got something this from onemarketmedia.com. I had like a blog where they had like a breakdown on this. So we are still like 1/3 of what you would have to pay if you had to buy this from actually.
So
yeah,
not to interrupt you, but
sure.
But I'm going to.
Yeah.
The reason that I thought that this money went so far up is that the number of people trolling her, threatening her, saying they wanted to rape her, destroy her, cut her up into little pieces. I saw a lot of this as, oh my god, that poor woman. Here, have $10.
To be honest, that's how it went for me. I was like, I don't know, seems like a reasonable video. I've seen some of her videos. I wasn't always convinced by what she's done. Like, I thought, Sucker Punch, I thought that wasn't a very good review that she made. So I was like, whatever. I'm going to leave this to other people. I watched the series, but I'm not going to support it. And then I saw the comments. I was like, whoa! Like, there was like this huge disconnect between the gaming community and me right now. I don't know.
And it's like, we should be having this conversation. Yeah. If game companies are failing across the board, and if game companies are losing money everywhere, then why wouldn't you want to have a more equitable distribution of games and a more equal product so you can have more people playing, more money playing?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think most people have been avoiding talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Coming back maybe to the because that's something that we'll probably come up with like in a future argument as well. But yeah, so like on a subject, like a objective, I guess, level of talking about how expensive it is to produce a video, she's is actually still very cheap. And there's another aspect which I thought was very important for us as people producing also videos on YouTube, which is that's like a very harmful argument to make. If you think about the future of videos on YouTube, like if you say it's not worth to pay this amount of money for content on YouTube, then you should actually have to say this to any kind of content on YouTube, right?
Yes.
It's kind of devaluating content on YouTube, saying that you shouldn't be made like this is. She's scamming people for money if she requires this much money to make a video on YouTube. Like, would you make this argument if Igor Rector was making videos, his Kickstarted his videos, or I don't know, like Geek and Sundry, or Tobuscus or PewDiePie or whatever. Like all these familiar and famous YouTube videos. It would be cool if those guys also had like a different way of producing their videos, like or creating like more higher quality content.
Yes.
And I, as somebody working on YouTube, I just don't want to close this door. I just don't want to have people, saying that this is a scam and this is not worth paying money for.
And what's funny is most of the people saying that didn't pay any money for it anyway.
Yeah, that's also one thing. And also like scam, like, do you really think that she, if given the opportunity, that she won't make those videos, that she would take the money and use it for what? Like, she's a person who likes to make feminist videos on YouTube. Like, it's not like she won't be making this if she had the money.
Yeah.
It's like a very, like, if you look at it closely, it's like an incredibly irrational argument.
And one of the most, I think, sinister sort of things about this is that nothing like this exists for educators. So people who want to teach, who are teaching gender classes or gender studies classes, feminist classes, they have nothing simple to turn to that they can show an audience who hasn't been educated about this idea. And that's the thing that she's trying to do. She's producing a curriculum after she's done with all of these videos. Or at least she says she's going to.
Of course, the argument is that people disagree with the topic of the curriculum or the message of their curriculum, and then that's a reason enough for them to silence her. To be honest, in my curriculum, I teach about video games as well, and I rely very much on content like this. Not just her stuff, but generally that stuff that people produce about video games on the internet. It's a very simple way to start a discussion. Or give I'm sending my students like a link to a video and say like summarize this until the end of the class or something for the next class or something. That's like a very valuable resource when you're teaching people about games. So having stuff like this in this quality is kind of like really convenient and something I'm worth supporting. Generally, I feel like this is one of those arguments that is like incredibly irrational, and I tagged some of the arguments as incredibly irrational. Because if you think them through, they're actually like really scamming people. I feel like this is often a result of like a cognitive dissonance situation. So to explain, because that's like a word that's kind of difficult to explain. This is a situation where that all of us has, none is safe from cognitive dissonance, which is where you are forced to accept two opposing opinions or two opposing, facts. One fact being that, in this case, I think this person is wrong. This person is clearly wrong, and then seeing that, oh my gosh, so many people are supporting her. And then what you do when you have this situation that so many people don't realize that she's being wrong. So many people disagree with me. What you do is you start creating, like latching onto the explanations very quickly. And there's like different strategies we do. There's like psychology thing that lots of people study. But generally, your brain is in explanation mode. I just need to find an explanation to reconcile those two opposing truths.
Yeah.
And quite often you latch onto things that are actually completely irrational because your brain is not in a mode of fact checking. You're not checking if this is correct. You're checking for something that just feels right and it works in any way.
You see it a lot. Like in all of the videos that I've been watching that were responses, you saw very specific circumstances where they're responding to something that she was attributing to a general trend in games. And it's like, this specific game doesn't conform to your general idea. It's like, well, no. For every generalization, there are specific circumstances that generalization isn't right. Yeah. So it's sort of like, yes, there are games that don't agree with this. That's expected. But then they're just like, no, everything she says is wrong because of this one example. Because one guy gets punched in the balls by a woman at the end of a game.
Yeah, that's a Thunderfoot we were referring to. Yeah, but that's like finding little nitpicks and then thinking like because you found this nitpick, then everything else must be false as well. Like I found the card that I need to pull out, and everything falls down like a house of cards. But that's something we come later on. As again, something we watch for. Like some of the arguments are like a little bit irrational. So maybe thinking about you wrote something down that was actually interesting, which is crowdsourcing. This creates a moral panic. What is a moral panic, Nick?
So the easiest way to talk about moral panics is in something that happened in America. And so in America, there's actually 3 moral panics in our foundation because the Quakers came in. And, here are not the Quakers, it was the Puritans. The Puritans are the ones that settled this place first, and they were the predetermined people, right? So, like, if you were successful, then obviously God has chosen you, and so on and so forth. So, this is the foundation for, like, the American way of life. If you have tons of money, obviously you're a better person, because you deserve the wealth that you've obtained. So in the Puritan way, there were 3 circumstances where there's something that happened that challenged their entire way of life. And the most specific example of this is the witch hunts, in that somebody somewhere caused a problem. And this one problem was so much of a fundamental problem within the ideology of like Puritanism that everything like it had to be destroyed. And this is the witch hunts, the Salem witch trials and stuff like that, where they're just burning women everywhere. And so a lot of people, when they talk about Sarkeesian, are talking about trying to incite a riot amongst women where they go out and they attack men.
Yes. She's trying to create a witch hunt, so to speak, and crowdsourcing is part of this idea, right?
Yeah, and because it's crowdsourcing, and because it's Kickstarter, and because she got attacked, then all of these people have come together and are now seeing all of these people, these defensive responses to her, and they're now going to hunt those people down and burn them at the stakes. And it's not too far from the truth. It's just there needs to be change, and change is always a problem. Always a problem. There's always tons of stuff that happens that people don't anticipate, and that's fun.
Like Red Letter Media is saying, like, this is different. I don't know. I don't like things that are different.
Yeah. Like, what's the example that we use in our classrooms? They talk about the birth of feminism, right? So feminism starts to get some power behind it, and they start being able to make it so that women can work in different roles. And if you watch Mad Men, this is sort of loosely about this whole concept, because it follows Joan, who is slowly gaining power in here through previously established ideas of beauty, and then this other woman, Peggy, who's getting power by simply following the rules and working hard. And so, with, like, feminism in this country, there was this, like, they're trying to cite a riot to go on where people fought for equality and stuff like that. The unanticipated consequence of feminism and female equality is the slow decline of the education system, because all of the women who were forced into being teachers could now go out and obtain a job that more directly rewarded them for their talents.
Yeah, so the best women are not teaching anymore. Yeah,
and so linked with the rise of women is the decline of the education system.
Huh, interesting.
At least in this country. I don't know what it's like elsewhere.
I don't know. I think the decline of education system is generally like there's a lot of factors that factor in here. But a good, interesting approach. What I wanted to say is that, the goal is basically to rock the boat. Like that's the plan here, right?
Yeah.
So how do you rock a boat gently? Like that's how do you put it nicely that this is a problem? How to make like a silent revolution? Like it's a little bit contradiction here that we're having here. But generally, interesting argument. Something I never seen. Maybe there's a point in here a little bit, like in a lot of them, like not quite as irrational argument that we're talking about so far. All right, I'm going to ask you a question, and something maybe out of order here, because we have our notes. We are prepared this time around.
Yes, definitely.
Something that you might say something about. She's biased. Everything she says just confirms her preconceived notions. She doesn't really examine the evidence. She's not looking at the evidence. She isn't using the scientific method. She has confirmation bias.
So the whole concept of bias in science is this really bizarre thing. Because people attribute a lack of bias to science when bias is essentially a part of science.
Yes.
You know, like either you're working for a grant from an interested party, or you are married to this idea because your entire career is based on this idea being correct.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and you see lots of, like, scientific controversies here and there.
Yeah.
And so the people who generally say, well, science isn't biased, are people who are not scientists. And this gets into that whole science literacy thing I was talking about earlier. People kind of get into this whole concept that science is this, you know, completely infallible, guiding, thing that's bringing us somewhere. It's got to bring us somewhere amazing. Progress. And
we're so close to discover the theory of everything.
And they watch Star Trek and they see, oh, well, we're just a level 7 civilization now. By the time Star Trek comes around, we're at least a level 15. But I'm sure there's level 20 civilizations out there that know stuff. And it's just this numeric thing that's repeated in games over and over and over. Like, the higher your number, the better you obviously are. And so it's like, this is something that's really embedded in the rhetoric of, like, religion versus science. Mm. It's like but what's weird is, like, without religion there couldn't have been science. Without science there's not religion. You get into a lot of really strange things, like Einstein saying, I want to know God's thoughts. And, the foundation of science starting in the church. And all of this other stuff. And you get into the atheists, which are a completely bizarre group of people.
Hey, I'm an atheist myself, right?
I'm not saying all atheists are awful.
I know, I'm just flaming you. Or trolling you.
When you talk about bias, yes, every scientist who does something is biased. That's an expected thing. Of course you're going to be married to the idea that you want to study.
Yeah, you want your theory to be correct. Something that's rarely mentioned is that the people say, like, oh, the scientific you have to obey the scientific method. But the scientific method, like, if you look closely at the actual steps, like, there's a step where you make a educated guess, and then of course the latter part is then checking if you were right. But there is a step in the scientific method where you just need to have a leap of faith, where you have to just make a hypothesis, and then you of course you go on and fact check the hypothesis.
And you're going to test and test and test and retest. Yeah. Like, science is founded on error.
Yeah, and of course there is also this aspect of peer grading,
peer review.
Peer review, exactly. So, if the scientific method was so infallible, then you wouldn't need a peer review, but it is. So that's why even if you checked yourself, you still need other people to check you. If you're right, and that's often how you often find. I mean, there's plenty of like very concise scientific, physical articles which turn out to be wrong in the peer review.
Yeah, or they're determined to be correct at the time, but then evidence comes up later where, this person fudged their data so that they could produce something that was revolutionary.
Yeah, or they made a mistake and nobody noticed it, or they just didn't know, like they just didn't develop a very simple, like, for example, Newton physics or something like that. Then later on Einstein came in, like a very simple idea. Einstein came in and it kind of like made Newton physics a little bit obsolete.
Yeah.
But they're still used nowadays because they're convenient for certain cases.
Yeah, and what is it? The birth of the double helix model.
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
It's completely awesome, and people should read about it. But really, what it comes down to is, and I say this, I've said this in the comments, I don't know how many times, and people seem to think that is a flame. Yeah. That it is good to question what she has to say.
Yes.
But you should also question what you're saying and why.
Yeah.
Now, we all live in a world where our views are typically shaped by people around us. We are not scientific, logical beings at all.
Well, yes.
So, sadly. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. The things that you're saying, the things that you think are coming from somewhere. Yeah. And it is important for you to constantly sit there and think, is this true? Do I actually think this? Where did I start thinking this? Why did I start thinking this?
What brought me here, making this argument here? There is like generally, like again, the scientific method is kind of like being idolized here, I think, many times. Like, once you get into different kind of, like in physics, maybe that's something that works well. Like in chemistry, that's something that works well. It starts being problematic once you get in certain types of biology.
Yeah, in social science, your subject doesn't operate according to any rule anybody knows.
Yeah, social science is really problematic. Like, but even in biology, like when you're sitting in a jungle and watching gorillas, you're not really applying a scientific method. You're just making observations and just trying to make sense out of this. And of course, then they might be biased. That's kind of like a thing that can happen. But you just kind of hope that you're collecting so much evidence that you have enough data to work with. Also, like once you get like into neurosciences, like psychology and even like scanning brains is getting like very difficult because it gets so much about interpreting data and not actually collecting data. Not the numbers don't speak by themselves. You kind of have to make them speak. And once you kind of try to force the numbers to speak, you have to be biased. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
You are making a statement or like a claim, and you're just trying to collect as much evidence or as much support for your claim as possible. But it might be biased. Of course, it is biased in some regard.
Yeah, a bias is the whole reason that science never stops.
Yeah. There cannot be like an end game with science.
We make the best guesses that we have at the time. And then we test them and retest them and retest them and retest them. Science is a never-ending thing. There is no such thing as a fact.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
There's the facts that we have are things that have been retested so many times that they're like, well, we don't need to be concerned about that much anymore.
There's also about this argument like, oh, she's not looking at all the event. She's not looking at the flip side. There's often a lot of people arguing, oh, she should be looking at men too, which she does, by the way.
She does, yeah.
But there is also an interesting detail that this is also often like a method that is used to promote things like creationism. Like there's often this argument with creationism saying like, oh, we should be teaching God in science class as well, because we need to teach all of the perspectives.
Yeah.
Or like teach the controversy, or like this is a buddy of us, Ben Abraham. He once mentioned that this is like a very common thing that come up when you leave like the comments open and somebody always comes in and says, but there is a different perspective on this topic. Yes, I know. I already considered it. I already discarded it. You don't have to bring it up again.
And you can't always talk about everything all the time. Like social science especially, and even like the chemistries and the biologies, you can't test everything all at once. You can test little bits. And over time, those little bits start to show a larger whole. Yeah. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, that's science. You can't say she didn't use the scientific method, but then not live under the thing that you're, like, saying she didn't do.
Yeah, yeah. But there's like a positive flip side. Like, the actual claims that she's making are actually not quite as daunting. Like they're actually quite humble. I think she's just saying like this is a thing that happens often in games.
Yeah, there's no accusations.
Well, there are maybe a little bit, but
yeah. Like,
but the gist, the fundamental thing that she's having, she's just listing examples of things that are happening often in games. Like there is not much debunking to be done here. Like this is a pretty obvious thing. So I don't think that it's fair accusing her of confirmation bias or something like this.
But going along with that,
yeah,
I have another topic here. A lot of the videos that we've seen. And I can't believe I spent all morning watching these videos. They say that she's cherry picking. She's picking examples that conform to what she believes.
Yes, cherry picking. That's one of the terms like white knighting, which I think is like an easy term that people throw in, like to not to have explain anything else. Cherry picking, case closed.
Yeah.
And I get that. It drives me up the walls a little bit. But I get that. Yeah, let me see. I have written down some stuff because there are actual numbers behind this. So cherry picking means that she's ignoring evidence, basically. That there is evidence against what she's trying to claim, and she's just choosing not to show it to kind of like, she's ignoring the bad cherries and just picking the best cherries. That's kind of like the idea.
Yes.
Right? So her claim is that this is something that happens often in games. That's the thing that she says. Not always, but often. Like, often women are being damsels in distress. That's the first videos that she's doing. And she collected, like, quite an impressive amount of evidence for this. Like, this is, she's talking about 28 games in her second video alone.
Yeah.
Like, this 28 examples of 28 different games that use this trope already. And not many people are maybe aware of this, but there's also, like, a Tumblr going on around with this. And it's called Bits of Tropes versus Women in Video Games on Tumblr. Just Google it, Bits of Tropes versus Women in Games. And this Tumblr has actually all of her research, like all of the data that she collected. And right now, I checked recently, she has 287 examples for damsels in distress in games. So if you're making the claim that she's cherry-picking, you better have more than 287 counterexamples.
My favorite example of this, of her second trope, didn't make it into her video, and I was really sad about it. Do you want to know
Which
what
one?
it was?
Yeah, please, do tell.
So I think it was, is it Modern Warfare 2? I think it's Modern Warfare 2.
Is it 4, the one with the helicopter pilot?
Yes.
So that's Modern Warfare 1. It's Call of Duty 4.
Okay, yeah, it's Modern Warfare 1. And
Yeah.
so, there's no women in any of the Modern Warfare games, really at all.
There are dogs nowadays, but there are no women.
Dogs can be in there, and that's a huge deal. Women, not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
No time to create models for female soldiers. Obviously,
Yes.
too taxing on the resources.
Yeah, too difficult. Like, we don't have the technology yet.
Women wouldn't run around with knives and guns anyway. We know this.
Yeah, they're too weak.
Anyway, so the only time that I've seen a woman in any of these games is in this particular circumstance where everyone has to escape from the city because there's a nuclear bomb that's about to go off.
Yeah.
And so our guy, it's not Soaps McTavish, it's a different guy. It's the American.
It switches perspective to a different person.
And he disobeys orders and goes in to save this wounded, crashed female helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
And he disobeys orders, goes and rescues a woman. As everybody's leaving, the bomb goes off, everybody dies. Mm-hmm. Spoilers.
It's a really good scene, by the way. Like one of the reasons why I thought Call of Duty 1, Modern Warfare 1, Call of Duty 4 was a really good game. That's like a very impressive scene.
But like this is, as a male, they needed to figure out some emotional connection, because if he just crashed in a helicopter because a bomb went off, well, he's an idiot. He didn't leave fast enough. Yeah. But no, he suddenly becomes this noble man because he's going to save this woman.
Yeah, the only woman in the entire game, and of course you have to save her.
And of course you have to save her, and you have to be murdered because of it.
Oh yes.
That's just
definitely.
The way
because
it goes.
you are now you're a hero, and now you can die hero's death. Yeah, generally, again, cherry picking. I can understand how people are thinking that she's cherry picking, because some of the examples are so incredibly spot on.
Yeah.
Like I was familiar with this trope. I knew that she would probably find a lot of games, but I was just shocked, and I was shocked how specific some of the examples were. Like, especially in the last video, like rescuing the soul of your girlfriend. Like, it's such an obscure story, and yet it appears so goddamn often.
Yeah, Gears of War 2, I'm looking at you.
It's really crazy. So I can understand that you kind of have like this. Wait a minute, this is way too convenient. But yeah, if you're claiming that she's cherry picking, then you better start listing all of those games where women are rescuing men, or where just men are being rescued. I don't know. Some people, what you often see, some person starts listing and he gets like to number 5 and says like, I could go on and on. And it's like, yeah, nice. You listed 5 games. That's cool. Like, we're talking about 287 examples. So go on. You should go on and on because you're not nearly there. Yeah, but even like imagine even if they found like 287 examples, it still would count as a trope, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, that's like a very very simple claim she's making. Like this is something that happens pretty often.
And this is the antithesis of science right here, using a specific example to debunk a general rule.
Yeah. So maybe we can move on to a common another common argument, which is she hasn't mentioned Metroid. God, she doesn't know anything about games. Metroid.
The fun thing is that if you wanted to mention Metroid in her videos, you would say that when Metroid first made its way over here, that every pronoun for Sir Samus Aran was a male or a masculine pronoun. Mm-hmm. He is the greatest bounty hunter in the world. He has been chasing Mother Brain. It wasn't until people played the game and played the game super well, because you had to go through in an hour.
Yeah.
Or use the Justin Bailey code.
Yeah.
To find out Samus Aran's actually a woman. And so this accidental insertion of a female character. And what's funny is that
was a shocking reveal. You played this game with this robot space marine, and at the end, I was a woman all along.
Oh my god!
This changed that. This was like a Fight Club reveal. Oh my gosh, they are the same person. Oh, spoilers, by the way.
And the funniest part of it was that the only time it mattered is that when you got her to take all of her armor off.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why once she gets mentioned in the future episodes, which I'm sure she will, people might get upset about this because there are so many problematic details about the way she was presented.
She is the silent protagonist stereotype all the way up until she takes off her armor.
Yeah, and she becomes a woman, and then the better you play the game, the more you can undress her. It's kind of a little bit problematic in this regard. Yeah. Imagine Master Chief would be doing this. Not only he takes his helmet off, but you can shows his chest.
Yeah,
and then he maybe does a strip, like a Chippendale kind of strip.
Or no, if he's dressed like Samus Aran in later games, where she's very well endowed.
Zero suit.
Yeah.
Zero suit Master Chief.
And it's funny, once they start getting into her character, that's where she loses all of her, I guess, assets in terms of being a female character or a woman character who matters.
Yeah, she loses a lot of her mystique. And there was this version from Ninja Team which was very problematic, especially in gender terms. One of the reasons why when I hear this argument, I often feel like the person I'm talking to hasn't really watched the videos or hasn't really understand what is going on here, is that Metroid is a good example for a female protagonist, but is actually completely irrelevant to the damsel in distress thing.
Yeah.
It's neither positive or negative. There's just no rescuing going on in Metroid.
Yeah.
Nobody's being rescued in Metroid, so, that's cool. Yes, that's a female protagonist, and that's good. But not really relevant to this cause. And I'm pretty sure it will come up in a future episode. And I'm pretty sure people will be upset about this because it's not all positive. But that's not to say that Metroid I think is one of my favorite games ever.
Really?
Especially on the consoles, Metroid Prime, especially, I really enjoy.
Oh yeah, the Prime series is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a really good example for a game that went from 2D to 3D without actually conforming to typical shooter tropes. Really something I appreciate and enjoy.
I think that we should talk a little bit about she damsels herself. And this is kind of tied into the whole, why hasn't she turned on her comments?
Yeah, let's put those two together because they often appear together, interestingly.
So, if you watch a lot of especially the really kind of not insane ones. I want to say insane because that's my opinion, but they're really not insane. Stuff from Angry Atheists.
Yes.
He says...
amazing atheist.
Amazing atheist. So, he says, while responding to her on YouTube, that he cannot respond to her on YouTube. And it's if
she's censoring me,
she's censoring me, doesn't want to have the discussion, but like we all know, and I think that it's pretty agreeable that if she opened up the comment section, the statistics section, the liking section, that what would happen would be what has happened to her in the past, which is men's rights activists. I guess we can call them that.
Or, I don't know, just people. I don't want to even put labels on people. Just, there would be like a huge flood of people just writing horrible things. They're like, oh, they make me a sandwich. Blah.
Bashing her constantly. And, you know, a lot of people, and Amazing Atheist does this, he says, that's the internet. And it's like, you
suck up to it.
Can't expect people to be okay with this.
Yeah.
Like, I hate when, and this is maybe an aside, like every time I have to drive into Austin, I see the worst parts of humanity all around me.
Oh, wow.
You know, like these angry, aggressive people who want to get ahead 5 minutes and they'll cut off 10, 15 people. And it's just like, why? Why do that? Why be that angry? Why do that? Why are we so angry at us? And
well,
it's like,
driving kind of does that to people. Nobody is free of guilt here.
No, I'm not free of guilt either. I'm a revengeful driver. But
yeah, well, that's true. That's kind of like internet. Internet also makes the worst.
But so internet also makes this. Nobody likes it. It's something that we should take upon ourselves to improve. We shouldn't say, well, that's just how it is. Because as a species, if that's how we are, then we should not be anymore.
Yeah, like they claiming like, oh, why isn't she facing the critics? Why she is not interested in discussion? And I would say she's probably very much interested in discussion. We're just not giving her any. Yeah, we're just giving her insults. So I kind of understand. You see, I've been blogging since 2006.
Oh yeah.
And I was the same way initially. I was I'm going to leave the comments open, and people will post all those thoughtful like arguments, and we have so beautiful discussions about all the things I'm discussing here. And I'm not going to say that this didn't happen. There were some really great discussions on my blog at times, but especially like for articles where I criticized very popular games from like a very specific perspective, not saying like this game is horrible, but saying like, for example, I said like Mass Effect 1 has a horrible user interface, and then I wrote like a 3-part article just taking everything apart. And those games received were linked on Kotaku or stuff like that. And then like lots of like Mass Effect fanboys came in, like Mass Effect fans, I would say, came in, and they made like those incredibly irrational, incredibly like non-topical arguments against me. Like I don't understand how games work. I never played this game, whatever. And like just writing those hateful comments. And moderating that kind of stuff was took a lot of effort. Like because I didn't want to just delete them. I wanted to formulate like good responses to them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, thanks for your comments. Let me address your concerns.
I did this for a while for the podcast.
Yeah.
I've probably done it for since we started Teamwork Cast, which is like about a year and a half.
Yeah.
I guess. Mm-hmm. And I'm burnt out. Like as I go on, it's like there was the one guy who's like, no, PlayStation 4 is fundamentally better than anything you could ever imagine. It's like, no. Like it doesn't matter if it can process better. What matters is whether or not this.
Why are you ignoring the evidence, Nick?
And then, like, every time that we've posted this sort of stuff, people go nuts. There was one guy who was going on and on and on about Halo and Call of Duty not being the same type of game.
Which is, I'm not going to say that this is not a fair argument, right? But in context of this discussion, it's just not relevant. Quite often.
And it's people talking. I remember people talking, especially to you, saying you don't know anything about games. Yeah, but it's like. You teach game design. You have degrees in this sort of thing. You have a pretty successful game. You've won awards as a game designer. Obviously, you don't know anything about games.
generally, yeah, it's also something that happens quite often. Maybe something that we can mention in another discussion. But yeah, that there's often like in those flaming comments, you will often like the arguments are going into, I'm going to prove that you're not a real gamer. I'm going to prove that you haven't played this game enough and that you don't know. I know the game better than you. Therefore, anything I say about the game must be true. Yeah. And therefore, everything you say about the game must be wrong because I know the game a little bit better because I played this. I don't know. I played this game one time more than you did because I have more achievements in this game than you have, and whatever.
Yeah.
But going back to the thing, like moderating kind of stuff can sap so much energy. Like if even you do it once and then you try to be rational about this, but once you have to do it every time you post something, you just start questioning like what does it bring to you, like opening the comments. Like this doesn't help me as a person. Like I'm not learning anything new. I just getting more upset about my audience, and other people reading the comments also are like this is devaluating my work. These people are defacing the thing I created with so much effort here.
Yeah, and it's kudos to her for realizing that if she continued to let them basically steamroll her, that eventually the focus would be on the comments that people were making instead of the content that she was producing.
Yeah, she's trying to kind of create like a safe space for people to engage her stuff without having to deal with the controversy around this subject in general.
And I mean, people can have conversations about this and are having conversations about this everywhere.
Yeah, and they are having that's I can understand in this argument in that every time she posts their videos, I like, oh, interesting, I want to see what people are responding to this, and like, oh, that's right, she closed the comments, right? But then of course I go to Kotaku or Polygon or something, and then I was like, I don't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, now I can close this and ignore this again.
God, it just, she doesn't damsel herself.
Yeah, what about this?
All of the comments have created a damsel out of her that other people feel that they either need to kill, which I think is weird. It takes two to damsel. You have to be somebody who cries out for help, but there's also need to be somebody who kidnaps her, and you're being the kidnapper here. So yeah, it's kind of like weird argument. Also, I feel like you cannot really damsel yourself. Like she's not really saying like, oh, please, somebody needs to help me in this regard. She's like being very proactive. That's again like this. She's damseling herself is also one of those arguments where I feel like you keep using this word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And the funniest part of it is that she's gone around talking about the conversation that people are having with her. And the conversation that they're having is that, well, there's a game made to punch her in the face. There are people who want to rape her. People want to see her breasts. People want to see her get the crap beat out of her. They want to rape her. It's like,
she didn't wrote all those comments. She didn't create this game where she gets punished. This is a real thing that is happening.
We should be... And, you can say, well, that's just the internet. It's like, well, that's also illegal.
Yeah, and that's also not good. Like that's not something we should be cherishing and appreciating. Maybe to summarize, I think the most reasonable response here is yes, she can close the comments. That's her right. That's the thing that you can do as you are using a YouTube channel, and it's not censorship. You can still respond to this. It's actually a lot of people are responding to this.
Yeah.
So a comment that is kind of like a very problematic comment is, well, I don't know what your problem is. Like, of course, women are damsels and victims in those games. Women are weaker than men.
For a while I was preparing for this class on sports.
Yes.
Right? And anytime you talk about sports, you have to talk about gender in sports in some circumstances.
Yeah. Because there's most of the sports are split between men and women.
And it's entirely fine for people to say, yes, there is a difference fundamentally between the musculature of a woman and the musculature of a man.
Yeah.
However, I think that what people are comparing...
Hey, Cthulhu is here.
I think that what people are comparing isn't that men and women are different. They're comparing male and female athletes without including themselves. Now,
yeah.
could the males saying this stuff, could the amazing atheist, to keep calling him out mostly because I that's the last video I watched. It could be Thunderfoot as well.
Yeah.
Could he beat the crap out of any of the women athletes that he is comparing?
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, I think that this is sort of a falsehood that should probably be addressed. Yes, women and men have different musculatures, and yes, men and women probably have different limitations in certain circumstances. On average. But for the most part, like Krystian could probably beat the crap out of me.
Yeah, she's like, what is the sport again? Roller derby. She could probably beat you up, man.
She could probably, I know she could beat up Shepard and Noxella, maybe. Yeah, he's kind of wiry. But like, I mean, my wife could kick your ass. There we go.
Yeah.
I was going to say. Yeah. And so the thing that is odd to me is that people constantly say, like, well, there's just a fundamental difference between men and women. I was like, yeah, there is a fundamental difference. It is a sex difference. One has a vagina, one has a penis. That's fine. Different testosterone levels. Yeah. It is odd that female bodybuilders are typically judged on how well they've retained their femininity.
Oh, interesting.
More than their the shape and curves of their muscles. And it's such a strange thing. Like, it's this thing that's perpetuated because people keep perpetuating it. It isn't something that I think that's necessarily true. That's pretty much all I want to say.
There's also that's one aspect. Like there's a difference on average, but the differences between individuals are often outweigh those average differences.
Yeah.
So as you said, like yes, women on average are weaker than men, and yes, men are faster and whatever. But that doesn't mean that every woman is weaker than every man.
Yeah.
It's easy to find, for example, a woman that is larger than that's some men, right?
Yeah.
Like a very tall woman. That's something that's easy to find. So it's also should be easy to find a woman that's stronger and whatever. And there's also another aspect. Like, yes, there might be like physical differences, but the differences are relatively small, and the way women and men are treated are huge.
Yes.
The differences between the men, like that's like generally this is like the nature versus nurture argument, which is kind of like at the core of scientific discussion since ages now. So we are not going to find a definite answer here. Generally, it's not wrong that there is a biological component, but you also have to acknowledge that there must be a huge cultural component between how we treat men and women.
And that's the hardest thing, I think, for people to get, because there's tons of sociobiologists who will examine estrogen content of embryos as they're born, and then wait until that child turns 18 and figure out what their sexual preferences are.
Yeah.
Which is a completely bizarre study, because there's like 18 years of socialization that happen in between there. And so you can't just say, well, this single biological factor has influenced this decision. There's a billion things that go into the whole idea of sexual identity.
Yeah, and also generally, like people who are studying these biological differences, they often run into those problems where they can find like different subtle nuances, like differences in how hard the grip is of a baby woman between a baby child and a female child and a male child, comparisons. And there's like 7% difference or something like this, or maybe it's more. I don't know, but it's kind of difficult to go from this to. That's why women are wearing skirts,
Yeah.
Like, where is the connection? Like, that's a huge leap there, and bridging this gap is like almost impossible now. And actually, like, most of biologists are not even trying to bridge this gap. They're just, observing things and not trying to make any kind of statements. And generally, like, a cool tip, like, if you're arguing with a feminist, just avoid this argument.
Yes.
Like, it's a very simple argument to discredit yourself in front of a feminist, because it shows that you actually haven't been paying attention to any kind of gender studies things ever. Because that's kind of like a very, very quick and basic fundamental misunderstanding with gender. That is, like basic work. That's like, feminism or gender studies 101. It's not just biology. There is a very important way in which we construct gender as a culture.
Yeah. Looking at you, Penny Arcade.
Oh well, let's just not go there. Let's just not go there. One reason why this argument is like very problematic, and you shouldn't be doing this, is that it historically it has been used to rationalize horrible things.
Yes.
Like, you had the very same argument you had with rationalizing slavery. Something that was even mentioned in even like very unrealistic movies like Django Unchained. Like, this is not just a crazy thing that happened in Django Unchained. This is actually something that people did, measuring size of brains of slaves and then saying, like, black people are born to be slaves because their brains are on average a little bit smaller or something like this.
Or
and
that,
of course,
they didn't have the Aryan blood in them, as much Aryan blood, because the Aryans were the ones that civilized the entire world.
Yeah, like attributing like to little physiological, like little biological differences between people, and then making an argument for huge cultural differences in the way we treat them. And of course, slavery, genocides were rationalized this way. And of course, for a long time, women themselves were actually subjugated with this argument, saying that women are not supposed to be voting because their brains are smaller and they're rational and whatever.
I think that the funniest part of that is like Prozac, the birth of Prozac, is Mother's Little Helper. The women needed a pill that would allow them to essentially be brain dead, so that they could continue to raise the children.
Oh yeah.
So here's this whole birth of this mind-numbing, mind-controlling industry. But that's a whole other discussion.
All right, Nick, do you want to ask me the question that we just hinted at?
Oh, yeah. So go ahead.
I have 5 answers to this question. Go ahead.
5 answers to this question? Okay.
5.
Do you think this should be our last question?
We could finish this up.
Okay. So, one thing that you see repeated constantly, in a very kind of aggressive manner, like, don't get into my freaking industry, you damn
woman,
is that games are like this because they're designed to make money, and games cater to men. Entertainment like this is supposed to be for men, therefore men are always the ones that are in charge.
Yeah, like, obviously, that's why we have so few female characters, so few female protagonists. That's why women are always being the ones being saved, because that's something that men like. And there, as I said, I have 5 different ways of answering. Each one of those is already a killer. So I assume. Okay, so let me go. Like, number 1, that's not really arguing against anything that Anita says. Like, she is noticing things, and you're describing why things are the way they are. Like, that's cool that you have this explanation, but that doesn't mean that there is no such thing as the trope that she's describing, and that doesn't mean that this trope is not a problematic one. Second one. This is talking about how games are. This is not talking about what's a healthy thing to be having. Like, this is not talking about what should be happening. This is just talking about what you think is happening. And this completely omits this problem is what is a healthy situation for games to be in. So, for example, like, if you're saying that games are addressing just 50% of the populations, that's kind of a very limited audience we're addressing here. So it's a very reasonable and financially sound idea to say, like, we should address the other gender as well, right?
Yes.
That would increase our audience by 50%, like double our audience. Okay, so number 3. Just because games are made for men doesn't mean that they have to be sexist. There's plenty of movies and books that men enjoy, and they aren't sexist. You don't have to make a game sexist for it to be enjoyable by men. Quentin Tarantino, for example, is like a very well-known guy who makes like very aggressive and very cool pop movies, and he just happens to have like very interesting characters in them, and they are actually quite, from a feminist perspective, are actually quite interesting. Maybe not so much in Django Unchained, but Jackie Brown.
Yeah, Jackie Brown's in every feminist class ever.
Yeah, it's a very good movie, and it's a very, very cool character. So, and they are very popular, and yet they are, I would say they are feminist, but they are not sexist. At least not. They're having interesting characters, and that's actually like the entire argument here. Just have interesting characters, and you don't have to be sexist. And for a guy, for me, like, I don't have to have a male protagonist. Actually, I'm not playing as a male protagonist right now. I don't need this. Alright, so next answer, women. Yeah, like, the argument is that the games are are made to be appeal to men. But women make 45% of the audience, actually, right now. There was recently a study that was released by the Entertainment Software Association. And their findings were that 45% of the audience are actually women. And, there's this beautiful quote: women 18 or older represent a significantly greater proportion of the game-playing population, 31%, than boys 17 or younger, 90%.
It's those
19.
Damn casuals.
Maybe. You can pick apart those numbers, because once you start discussing about numbers, you get like into like very long-winded discussions, of how indicative it is. But generally, like, a lot of women are playing games, and it's not a wrong thing to keep them in mind as well, I would say. There's one last argument, which is a more like a personal argument from me against this thing that we're talking about, and it is, if you're making this argument, that these are games made to make money, right?
Yes.
So I'm teaching people game design. And what I often see is that students come in and, like, in the early years, they're making like their first games or first game design documents, writing, what kind of games they want to make, or making like prototypes. And this is a situation where they are not actually making any money. Right? There is no monetary incentive behind it. They're just free to make whatever they want. They can do any kind of game. And even those people, especially those people, make like the worst, stereotypical female characters. And I'm in a unique situation as an educator to ask them, why did you do this? Why are all your female characters, why do they all have like wearing a tight jumpsuit with a zipper in the front? And you can see like their underwear sticking out and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't know. I never thought about this. I guess that's, I just wanted to make like an attractive character. There's basically like, it's not like the game developers are like, man, we really would like to make this interesting, complex character, but we can't, because we have to appeal to an audience. The developers are the publishers are holding us back. Our game wouldn't make any money if we made this. Our artists are struggling, are really asking us to create those beautiful characters that are varied and interesting, but we can't. Alas, we can't. We are trapped in this industry, and that's not the case. Clearly, people are working on this in these companies. This is something that appeals to them. This is at least something that they never thought about. It never just crossed their mind that this could be a thing that we're doing. That, we maybe shouldn't be capturing this character and making her like something that has to be rescued. We shouldn't be having this character wear lingerie instead of battle armor. It just doesn't occur to them. They're like, yeah, fuck yeah, video games, let's do this.
And, going along with that, it's like the answer to fixing this isn't to make the opposite true. There shouldn't be games where women are rescuing men. You can't have a simple solution to this sort of
like that's, again, like one of the arguments, like, why doesn't she make a game? Like, why does Anita doesn't make this video? Why doesn't she make a game where everything is speechy? And again, that wouldn't fix anything. Like, one game is not enough here.
Like, the whole problem with this is that it's so established and so invisible in our culture that people are doing it, as you were just saying, without even thinking about it. They're like,
that's a default game. That's a default game. We have a dude in like battle armor and a chick that wears a bikini, a male bikini, chainmail bikini.
And it's like, yes, that's what's happening. But the answer isn't to simply put the woman into gear. And then there needs to be more done about it. There needs to be more research about it.
Well, it would be a good start. It's just enough. It wouldn't be enough to have like one game when we are in gear. It would be interesting if this was like this was more like a prevalent thing that people think about when developing games. Like maybe it, of course, like, and that's maybe like a good way to finish up this discussion, because we've been going for such a long time. Like, this is not an argument. Like, I don't think those videos are an argument. I think people are getting really upset about this because they're feeling like, because we're having this discussion about games and violence, and maybe we should censor games or like limit the access of games and stuff like that. But this is like a different discussion here. This is not a situation where somebody like Anita comes in and says like we should outlaw all those games because there's like princes that are being saved, and that's not cool. And there is no danger here. Like even though those videos exist, like it's not like developers will stop doing those games immediately. Like the princess, the damsel in distress is not in danger of dying out.
No.
By far not. Like, this is going to be happening for a long time after those videos are being released. It's just her coming up and making, like, pointing out something. Look, this is something that happens quite often. Isn't it this is kind of weird that we're having this? Like, shouldn't we be having like more at this point, like more diversity?
And, going along with that, this is something that we've talked about, but most of the cast, I guess, didn't agree with me. Huh? So there are games that are being made that are attempting to bridge the gap that exists currently between equitable distribution of ideas and the male-dominated entertainment media that we have now. And so games like Remember Me, or games like, I constantly refer back to it, but the Black College Football Experience. Things like this. If we want to have an equal distribution of ideas within the game industry, and I think that Sarkeesian is kind of maybe paving the way for hopefully like the future generations of game makers to think about this. Mm-hmm. But if games are a market, and the market is completely dictated by what's purchased, games that maybe are flawed, because Remember Me has been kind of not universally, but mostly panned. Black College Football Experience, because it's a football game, was completely ignored mostly by the game industry. We need to purchase those games, so that those game makers who have ideas that might be important to video games later can have an opportunity to continue to make games, or to continue to try that thing.
Yeah, like this, there should be like a signal from the industry saying like, okay, like give us more of this. Like, this is some good juice. I would probably, I wouldn't disagree with you, but I would maybe do a different argument there.
Oh yeah, what would you say?
My argument would be like, I don't think like, because I personally don't like this pay with your, like, vote with your money situation here. Yeah. Because quite often, like, you pay a game and then you spend like $60 and nobody else does, and then it's like, okay, I paid $60 and to buy a game that maybe is not good. Like, I often feel like this isn't giving like people too much power to say something.
Yeah.
So my argument would be maybe like just accept this discussion, like. This is a worthy thing to be discussing within the games industry, because it has the opportunity to actually influence decisions in the games industry. Because this is something that is discussed, whether people are arguing against it or for it, like, this is generally like a topic that is on the table when discussing games. So the next time a game comes out, there might be more people thinking about, wait a minute, what would Anita Sarkeesian think about this game?
Do we need to make WWASTAG bracelets?
maybe. But for me as a designer, that's actually like that's something I actually do. Like even if there's people I don't agree with, just having like a filter in my head, like create like a persona in my head, imagining what a reaction of a given person would be to a product I design or a game I'm designing, just so I can have a better understanding of the kind of reaction I can expect.
Yeah.
Or how generally my products and games are what kind of influence they're having on people.
And the funny thing is like if we can change the stereotype of the gamer, because the very first person you think of when you say gamer is white dude, white teenage dude. If you can do something about that, then if you start thinking about gamers as just people in some fashion, then I think a lot of stuff would change.
And the cool thing, the interesting thing is that gamer has also negative aspects.
Yes. And
I feel like quite often game developers are also exploiting those negative aspects, are kind of like laughing at gamers.
Yeah.
Secretly. So, for example, one thing I argue against was the Nun trailer from Hitman.
Oh, that was awful.
Because every time a game is sold with sex, I often feel there is a certain mode of thinking that went behind this, and it is our audience are people who like to watch a lot of porn.
Yeah.
Who don't have access to boobs.
No access to boobs.
So we're giving them, and I watch porn. You watch porn, I would say, right?
Sure.
It's not that something that we don't like this kind of stuff. It's just I don't need to have this stuff in my game. I can find my porn on my own. Thank you very much.
Well, one problem with this is that America is extremely oppressed when it comes to repressed when it comes to expressing sexual ideas.
Oh yeah,
and so we're the prudes of the world.
That's true. Yeah.
We consume all of this stuff in secret. Like, would I want you to know that I watch porn with my wife? No. Would I want anyone to know that I watch porn at all? No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I put you on the spot there?
But it's one of those things that we all know to be true.
Yeah.
But we just don't talk about it. We can't talk about it because it's something that we're all giant prudes of the world here in America.
Well, maybe there are, things are slowly changing, and hopefully, this is one of the discussions that will change. Generally, I find it positive. Like, I'm a very naive person. Yeah. So I always feel like I don't believe that there is something like dumb people. I feel like if somebody's making like an unreasonable argument, that doesn't mean that they're being dumb or something. Yeah. It's just they're coming from a very different perspective, and they just haven't had an opportunity to consider a thing, or maybe that was like cognitive dissonance, And the thing is that you and me, we've both been there already. We've both underestimated topics. Yes. Tremendous amount of times, and then it turned out to be way more complicated than we thought.
You have to understand that you will be made a fool of. You will make mistakes.
Yeah.
Probably the more complex argument that's beginning to take shape right now is the one that involves all of the trans video game makers, like Anita, or Anna
Anthropy,
Anthropy, and all of those folks that are now starting to make games or making twine games or talking about zine culture, and the Sarkeesian stuff isn't anywhere close to being as complex as to include that group of people.
Yeah, it's very basic. It's very that's basic. Also, maybe you want to mention something that we haven't mentioned. Like a lot of people also criticizing her that she's being not academic. Like this is not a scientific work. But it's not. It's like a video that is really like a very basic, high school level.
Yeah, it's trying to take a very complex topic, start at the bare bone essentials, and move its way up. Will she do a good job? There's no way to know. You can criticize her. That's fine. Criticize her for the points she's not making. Criticize her for maybe points that she's boiling down too much. But the topic and the conversation is something that definitely needs to happen.
Yeah.
So don't criticize her just for existing.
Yeah. Just take it at face value. Generally, make a diss check. If your argument is that everything she said is wrong, you might be oversimplifying things. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to repeat TavernTalk in the future. There's still a lot of things that we haven't discussed yet. Maybe we're going to do this in the future. We're going to leave the comments open so you can post stuff, but we will be moderating the comments. So if you're being a dick, then we will delete you. So please be considerate and be polite. And so yeah, share with us your opinions. What did we watch? We watched Thunderfoot.
Yeah, we watched Thunderfoot.
The Amazing Atheist. There was also investigative journalism, which was really horrible. And but there were some positive ones. I'm gonna take our
is it
list.
Lucian 09?
Lucian 09 was an interesting one because it was varied. Kite Tales was an interesting one, like a very different approach from what I see most. There was a not related to Anita, but there is also like a very cool nostalgia critic video on princesses, which I thought was very interesting, like a very different take on the perspective of princesses.
You know who the first female was? So first, see, I say female because all of my conversations are typically with social scientists, and so this is embedded into my language. Women. The first woman who was digitized into a game was Lois Lane. At least that I could find for the Atari 2600 Superman game.
Interesting. You know that one of the first images that was digitized was a Playmate model?
That doesn't surprise me at all.
It is like a very common image that is being used to test compression algorithms.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the Playboy. Like, they had just a Playboy running around and they slapped it on a scanner. And nowadays, like it is like the teapot in 3D models. They're actually using it over and over again. And it's actually not a very bad photo. It doesn't show her naked, just her face. And it's actually a very cool photo because it's like lots of like different colors because she's wearing a hat with a blue feather. And that's actually, like a very cool chromatic challenge for compression algorithms.
Ah, neat.
So it's accidental, but it's actually really neat. Anyway, so we will be leaving off because we have to record the actual podcast. So comment or don't comment or tell us if you want to have another of those episodes. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.